On behalf of the Tabolotney family, I'd like to thank you guys for your support. And over the last few weeks, I've spoken with many people from all walks of life, our friends, our family, and total strangers that have messaged me on Facebook that I honestly, I don't remember you, I'm sorry. But it's been fantastic to hear from you all, and I hope I continue to hear from you guys. Now, I've spent hours and hours sorting through photos and videos of Curtis and my family, and I've celebrated and cried over Christmas dinner with family and friends throughout the weeks, and a common theme has repeated itself. Curtis was kind, he was down for everything, he was funny, annoying at times, and as every single person has told me, he's a ball of energy that could not be tamed. Curtis was supernova. One thing I cannot deny after going through all this stuff is that Curtis was loved. Watching old videos of my family on Christmas Day, birthdays, family vacations, and talking to friends, you guys loved him, and I did too. Curtis was my brother, and I loved him. Now, growing up as his brother, I feel like I had a different experience of Curtis than some of you guys. I could always tell that he looked up to me. But he would always want to be included, even when he wasn't welcome. He would pester me, and he'd be bouncing around all over and over again. And I think I've screamed "shut up" more times than I could possibly remember. I definitely found that I had a hard time with that when I was going through the whole home movies. I can't imagine what it was like for him to grow up with that, especially since now that I look back at the movies, those moments when I thought he was annoying me were generally funny and authentic excitement about life. He would always find a way to make you laugh. He would annoy the heck out of you, and then he'd just find a way in with some outrageous joke. I mean, sure, it could be racist, it could be sexist, it could be unintelligible, or just out of left field, but he would find his way in, and as any great comedian would tell you, that's half the battle. The other half that Curtis didn't quite grasp was to know your audience. We had a wonderful childhood looking back. We grew up in a tight neighborhood together with plenty of involvement from the parents, the Yees, the Rudecks, the O'Donnells, the Watsons, the Vanderwells. I see you guys here today, thank you. The Phillips, thank you guys for showing up. It really, really is a lot. And a common theme with these families were generally 2 to 3 kids, and it made for a ton of fun on Pintail Drive. And you know, they say it takes a village to raise a kid, but at times it definitely felt like Curtis could have used an army. I look out tonight and it looks like there was an army, you know? Now, Curtis brought tons of fun on that street, whether it was snowball fights, water fights, street hockey games, laser tag. I don't know, Brandon and Andrew might remember that stupid, weird laser tag we all got for Christmas that year? Pool parties, trampoline days, birthdays. It was such a blast. Our house was always a party, and Curtis was the energy. When he was younger, sometimes Curtis struggled at school, not from a lack of intelligence, but the fact that he couldn't pay attention for long periods of time. But he loved his friends that he made at Westwood and Stevens Secondary. I see a lot of you guys tonight, and we were truly blessed to have all of you guys around. It was probably his wonderful childhood that kept Curtis so young at heart as he would age. Curtis was always calling me, looking to go bowling, golfing, swimming, to Playland, the arcade. As I grew up, I got busy with work. I wish I'd said yes more often. Curtis had stories. Many of them I haven't heard yet, but I have appreciated hearing the varieties of stories from his close friends that have really outlined the unique character that my brother was. We've left a book out this afternoon that I would appreciate if you took the time to write any stories of note that come to mind. Please, do not hold back. I know my brother was a wild character. Some of the stories might have adult content. I don't care. Please write them in the book. Well, now Curtis certainly left his mark. I know at least one of you told me a story last week about the scar Curtis left you with as a reminder of your friendship. I have mine too. Now, when we were younger, a disagreement between Curtis and a friend of mine while we were playing ball hockey left me with 5 stitches to this finger when I put my hand out to stop a stick flying from my friend's face. Now, thank God it was a finger and not an eye, but yeah, Curtis had a temper at times. I remember being jealous of my brother when I was younger. He was shameless and seemed to have a gift with the ladies. He was working hard at a younger age and seemed to have it all. He had a fast car, if you remember the 3000 GT, he had cute girls, and he had money. I was playing the part of the rock star, and, just making my way through. He was young. Sorry, I couldn't work with my dad as well at the insurance company. We're just two totally different personalities, but Curtis loved it. So Curtis loved his friends. He loved his family, and he loved people. He was loyal to a fault, and he was always there when you needed him. If you needed help being picked up late at night, I would regularly call him to bug him when I needed him to pick me up at the mechanic. That was my thing. Curtis, come get me, and we'll do the car shuffle. But Curtis always had your back. One of Curtis's friends recently told me he would be there for her when she was lonely after leaving home at an early age. He would pick her up and keep her company through the night as a loving platonic friend. That's just who he was. He was a loyal friend. Heck, he was even there for his friends when they were let out of jail and needed a ride, or providing with a friend with a job after getting out of prison. Throughout his life, Curtis got away with everything. I swear, that kid had 9 lives. I thought he was indestructible. Just when you thought crashing the car through a hedge and into a car and through the front door of the house was the worst that he could possibly do, he'd turn around and one-up himself by crashing into 4 parked cars or driving a golf cart off a cliff. Curtis used to brag and say, "I'm hard to kill." After a while, I thought this could be true. I mean, he died and was revived during a fire at his apartment, and he survived more than a few overdoses at our place. I used to joke it was the abbreviation that gave him his 9 lives. Curtis Andrew Tabolotney, C-A-T, 9 lives like a cat. Man, Curtis was a ton of fun, but he also struggled over the years, and I'm sorry to take a serious shift in what I have to say, but I don't believe in staying silent, and neither does my family here. We solve our problems by ending the stigma around mental health and addiction, and we do that by talking about it. Sorry. Curtis had a substance use disorder with several underlying mental health illnesses. We struggled for years to find the support we needed to get an accurate diagnosis or treatment for what he had. Curtis would have an episode, he would get sent to emergency, at times he was suicidal, and after an overdose, he would go into the psych ward at Richmond Hospital, and usually within 24 hours or less, he would be released. They couldn't offer us a diagnosis. They would tell us that while he was on drugs, they couldn't give us a proper diagnosis. My parents would beg the doctors to help for years with no avail. Curtis would get clean. He would swear he was clean, but he would still be seeing things, hearing things, and suffer from severe psychosis. We would plead with the doctors for a diagnosis and proper treatment, but the doctors would insist this couldn't be determined if he was on drugs. It took 10 years for us to get a diagnosis of schizoid affective disorder. Now imagine if we had got that 10 years earlier. The problem comes with the psychosis, and with the psychosis comes paranoia. So Curtis, he really wasn't into seeing the doctors. Our family would plead for them to let us advocate for Curtis's care, but this is non-existent in the province of BC. Curtis had to be a harm to himself or voluntarily seek treatment. Apparently multiple overdoses, and some of which were intentional, doesn't constitute a harm to himself, or at least not enough for the doctors to take this seriously. Now, I can't imagine the toll that this took on my parents, having to perform CPR on him as he laid in his bed waiting for help. More than once. The problem with this system is that most doctors don't want to treat the patients with multiple diagnoses. It's too hard for them to find the underlying issues, but more so they don't have the time. They don't have the time to spend with the patients. Now, families need to be able to advocate for their family members like most mentally ill patients. Curtis would never voluntarily seek the psychiatric treatment, at least not with any form of lasting detox, not voluntarily. The doctors would refuse to talk to my parents because Curtis had the right to privacy. We've heard from many parents who have expressed the same frustrations at losing their child to drugs and felt hopelessly ignored by the system. My parents want to intercede and advocate on behalf, but the system refuses to allow this to happen. People are dying. I've lost my brother. My friend lost her mother just days before Curtis. My parents have heard of 2 other young men in our community who have passed since Christmas. Now, I want the people in this room to know people do drugs. People do drugs. And they're dying because the drugs that are in circulation are not safe. I'm exhausted, and I'm tired of the pain caused by the lack of momentum from all levels of government in providing care and safety. The number of friends that I no longer have, or the friends of mine who are grieving lost loved ones, it grows every year. And I've had a number of you reach out and ask me, what can I do for you? I want you guys to talk about it. Talk. All right? Write your MP, attend a town hall meeting, and start to demand some action. We need to be approaching all levels of government to do more. Donate to any number of charities that advocate for addiction services and mental health. Our family's been donating to Pathways Clubhouse in Richmond for years, which I believe Curtis attended as well. Am I correct? Yes. This would be a great starting point to get involved. Reach out to your friends in need. And I mean, at the very least, buy that guy on the street a cup of hot chocolate and remind them that they are loved by someone. Put some love out into this world and make a difference. Now, on the way out, we have a petition for the Stop the Harm, and if you guys could take a second to reflect on that and possibly sign, the family would really appreciate it. Now, our family and close friends exhausted every effort, I can promise you that we could think of to save Curtis. His partner, Fernanda, she stood by him constantly in support that the Curtis we loved would prevail. And I know you loved him. 2 friends that I would like to acknowledge today are Brandon and Mike. I know you 2 loved him and had numerous talks with him over guidance and support and love. And I respect you both, and I really appreciate that. And Jordan Marr, he would always talk positively about your support as well and tell me about some of the fun times you guys would have together. He even told me about that snowboarding trip. I read the letter that you left my mom. It was really sweet. Thank you. So from my family to you guys, we would like to thank you. My cousin Sean, Jim, I know you guys were a constant support for Curtis. And Lori, I know you gave your shot too, and he came and stayed with you for a while. Thank you guys. Curtis loved all of you guys, like brothers, like families, and this extends to anyone that reached out and offered support over the years. Thank you. Now, I know some of you here today may have joined in with Curtis over the years using drugs. I know some of you may still do them. I'm not going to tell you how to live your lives, but I do beg you to please be responsible with your drug use. We don't need any more of these funerals. Don't use alone. Test your drugs and seek treatment if the drugs are too much. I will always be here if you're struggling, and would like to support anyone in this room authentically and without judgment. I love you, and exactly as Curtis would have done, I'm here for you. That's a promise. And finally, I want all of you in this room to know that Curtis would not want anyone to take any pain away from this. Curtis loved you all, and any of you struggling with this, please find peace in the fact that Curtis would want you to be happy, healthy, and having a ton of fun and success with your lives. Curtis was authentic that way, and I swear to God, he loved everybody. There was not an unkind word that he had to say about anyone, ever. I don't think I ever heard him say anything unkind about anyone. I'd like to wrap this up with a few takeaways that I've had from my time with Curtis as kind of a moral of the story, if you will. Number one, always be down for anything. And I wish that I had said yes. Always be down for anything. Be kind and be silly. If there's an inappropriate joke that you can make at any point and it's funny, say it, because that's what Curtis would have done. He would have said it at the top of his lungs, and if you didn't listen, he'd say it again. Be loyal and be supportive. Be forgiving. Unconditionally, he was there. Love with intention. Act like a kid, have some fun, and go to the arcade. I love you guys. Mom, Dad, Troy, I'm sorry. Jim, Sean, Lori, Fernanda. Curtis, I miss you. And I hope you found some peace, and I hope this honors you.
No, the lid. He was the bad cop, so I'll be the good cop. So how does one go about describing Curtis? Words like compassion, funny, fiercely loyal, and gregarious come to mind. He was also competitive, complex, curious, and a showman. In the latter part of his life, his friends called him Kurt Dog. Why, I don't know. Maybe somebody can explain to me later. He saw himself as a lover of women and a fighter of men. He had a fondness for clothes and loved to dress to the nines whenever he could. But most of all, from a young age, we saw him as an energizer bunny, full of piss and vinegar and a bottomless pit of verbal and physical energy. He could get under your skin one minute and have you laughing and loving him the next. As a baby, he was quite a handful because he rarely went down before 11 and was usually up by 6 or 7. Needless to say, we didn't get a lot of sleep, though. We always told him that if we'd ever had him first, he would have been an only child. He loved to climb things. He definitely didn't like being separated from the ones he loved. So needless to say, keeping him in his crib as a baby was a full-time job. One morning, when he was about 10 months old, I came downstairs for breakfast before going to work, and I did a double take as I found him standing on the kitchen table. Starting a few months later, his mom would come downstairs in the morning and sometimes find him attempting to pour his own cereal. She used to keep telling herself what a helpful child he was as she cleaned the floor. At age 2, he started sharing a bunk bed with his older brother, and he had to have the top bunk so he could climb up every night. Many a night we had to tell him to stop running his feet on the ceiling to go to sleep. Then there was the nights when he'd wander in our room late at night, open the door, just come in and go, "Wah!" at the top of his lungs to release some nervous energy and scare the living hell out of us. For those who didn't know him well, he was diagnosed at a young age with ADHD, a big age for hyperactivity, a really big age. From a young age, he knew what he wanted in life and was not afraid to let people know. My first recollection of his stubbornness was when he was 2 years old. We were in San Diego at SeaWorld, and the exhibits for the day, and we'd been at the open pond where there were starfishes in it. You could pick them up and touch them. Curtis didn't want to leave the starfishes, but we dragged him away to see the rest of the exhibits. We'd been walking for about 10 minutes, and when we happened to simultaneously look at each other and went, "Where's Curtis?" I thought he was in the stroller, and she thought I was holding his hand. So, anyhow, it was a panicky 20 minutes as the park shut down all the entrances. This was during the era when young children were being hijacked, so it was a real concern. So anyhow, we ran around the park and frantically looking for him. Finally, about very, very long, 20 minutes later, he showed up crying in the arms of a staff member who found him at, you guessed it, the starfish pond. The one saving grace was that for the rest of the trip, if he said no, he wasn't going to go somewhere, we would just wave and say goodbye, and he would eventually come a-running. When he was about 3, he was at McDonald's for lunch with his brother and mother, and he wanted a cheeseburger, so under no circumstances was he going to eat a fillet of fish that she had bought for him. His protesting ended when he casually pulled out his wee willie and, in a very Monty Pythonish way, waved it in his mother's general direction. We've subsequently found out that from his friends that this particular act of defiance was not necessarily a single occurrence in his lifetime. That one goes down in the annals of family lore for some of the more embarrassing moments, along with the time he peed in the next door neighbor's pail while they were washing their car on the street. Or the time when Debbie was in the bank line and Curtis started yelling and fighting with his older brother, Trevor. They were rolling around on the bank floor. Before Deb could reach them, Trevor was on top of Curtis and was banging his head on the tile floor. Needless to say, the banking didn't get done that day as Debbie ran out with 2 kids in tow, head down and completely mortified. One thing I admired about him was how easily he could meet and talk to people he didn't know. People gravitated to him, and the girls loved his ginger hair. The summer of 1998, he went to see Backstreet Boys in concert with his mother. She really wanted to go too. They were walking on the concession in between sets when he was suddenly swarmed by 2 very young and boisterous teachers that had recently taught him. They just had to have their photo taken with him. And it just so happened that around the same time, Destiny Child, AKA Beyonce before she was famous, which had been the warm-up band for the Backstreet Boys, happened to be walking on the same concourse. They wandered over, and there he was, getting a picture, surrounded by 5 very young, beautiful women. Not bad for a 12-year-old. We figured that was only the beginning of things to come, and sure enough, it was.
Was it?
Oh, was it Boys to Men? I don't know. I didn't go, so. Oh, okay. Boys to Men. Okay. He cared for all he knew, and even those he didn't. One of his friends recently conveyed a story to me that Curtis was visiting him, and they were out for a walk when he stopped his friend in his tracks as a little old lady had dropped her groceries, and Curtis went to her assistance. Very typical of him. Curtis saw himself as a protector of others as he stood up for his younger brother and many of his friends over the years. He was more than happy to throw him down to defend someone. This need to protect others included pets as well. There was a time that he decided that rather than using a broom, it would maybe be more prudent to climb on the fence in the middle of a rainy night to confront a raccoon he thought that the small black animal that he was wrestling with and fighting with was one of our cats. It was a kitten, all right, but a baby raccoon kit. And when the mother turned to give Curtis what for, he fell off the fence and fractured his arm. He sure did love animals. He ran the gamut from guinea pigs, hedgehogs, and ginkgos to a large assortment of cats and dogs of all shapes and sizes over the years. I think he loved them so much because they would love him unconditionally and never judge him for his behavior. He bought a kitten last spring, which you can see up there, as he felt it would give his life more purpose and provide him with focus. He named her Luna as she had a small moon shape over on her forehead after the character of the childhood cartoon Sailor Moon. Shortly after settling in, it turns out Luna had parvo, or distemper, and had about a 5% chance of living, as usually only older cats have any chance of surviving parvo if it is caught early. He nursed that kitten day and night for several days, never leaving her side, feeding her through a syringe. He willed her back to life, and she did. Although, to our great amusement now, she kind of walks and runs sideways at times, so it's quite funny to watch. The 2 of them became quite inseparable as she would ride on his shoulder in the car and even go to work with him. I was fortunate to have coached Curtis in many different sports: soccer, elementary school basketball, hockey, and fast pitch. He was very competitive by nature and always wanted to be the center of attention. Therefore, he played goalie in hockey and pitcher in fastball. His ADHD played a factor in his positioning, as he was forced to actually pay attention when he played those positions. No picking dandelions in the outfield if you're the pitcher on the pitcher's mound, or skating circles in the corner if you're the goalie. Later in life, he enjoyed snowboarding with his friends, slow pitch in the summer, and recently took up team dodgeball. I started in the family business at the age of 17 as he was finding different ways to get into trouble at school. So he graduated high school early by taking one course at night and started working for our brokerage full time. He'd actually worked in our office from a younger age, helping with cleaning the office and doing filing back in the day when things weren't paperless. From an early age, he had the gift of gab, and it served him well in the insurance business. He wasn't hesitant to talk to anybody about pretty much anything. Customers truly enjoyed interacting with him, and I received lots of compliments from my personal customers that he had assisted. I gave him a challenge this August to help get our Google reviews up on our website, and he added 35 reviews to our list during those 3 months. He made a point of checking in on staff to see how they were feeling, would constantly show his appreciation of them, and be that sounding board when called upon. He also looked out for his customers. Several years ago, he had a customer that their insurance ran out that night, and so they would need their vehicle in the morning to get to work. Much to their surprise, when they woke up in the morning, they found he'd driven out to Surrey in the middle of the night and put the decal on their car to make sure they wouldn't get a ticket. His caring attitude extended to the neighbors as well. He was the social butterfly of our cul-de-sac and would often be found out chatting with many of the neighbors of all ages. He loved times like Easter, Canada Day, Halloween, and Christmas, so he could help decorate our house and interact with the neighborhood kids. He would go out and buy fireworks for the neighborhoods at Halloween to entertain the kids in the area. He'd pull out toys and bubble makers and even chalk for the kids to play with on the holiday weekends. Family was very important to him. He was always calling his cousin and uncle to chat, or calling to check in with his elderly grandmother. They were both full contact smokers, and at family events they would be summarily banished to the patio to enjoy themselves. They spent many hours out there chatting away to one another. So I guess he's up there right now having a cigarette with her. So he was thrilled when he recently found out that he was going to become an uncle this coming June. He would have loved having a niece or a nephew to spoil. Curtis was never lost for words and had an opinion on pretty much everything. Did I mention he loved to talk? Many of our animated family discussions at the dinner table with Curtis often got carried away, as will happen when you have 4 ADHD people spiraling away. Many of his friends attest to the fact that as a conversation with Curtis progressed, it would often get to the point where he would tell Curtis to shut the hell up, in a nice way, if you wanted to get a word in edgewise. Otherwise, he would just talk and carry on forever. Let's face it, he could be a real pain in the ass, but then he would always make you laugh, and you ended up forgiving him for whatever latest stunt he had pulled. As he grew up, he loved to have fun and party, as too many of his friends can attest to. The house he grew up in had a large backyard, a pool, hot tub, and a trampoline, an ADHD kid's wet dream. We were often the neighborhood community center, as he would have his friends descend on our house to wreak havoc. Many a summer night, I would often open the window to our bedroom that was right over the hot tub and overlooked the pool and shout out, you can probably guess it, "Curtis, please shut the hell up," so we can go to sleep. Well, him mostly. He had lots of quote, girlfriends as friends, as he had a way about him with the ladies, and then there was that ginger hair. He had as many girlfriends as he had male friends, which didn't always go over well with whoever was the current girlfriend of the day. He maintained enduring friendships with many of these young ladies he had dated in the past, as they still cared for him, but they just couldn't handle his energy, such as it was. We butted heads often, and it was a rare day that I got the best of him. One day I came home after I had repeatedly told him he couldn't close the door to his room if he had a girl with him. But we all know the rules weren't meant for Curtis. So much to his shock, he found I had taken the door off his bedroom, off the hinges. Past 7 years, the love of his life was Fernanda, who has become like a daughter we never had. She has the patience of a saint when it came to Curtis. No matter what stupid thing he did, she was always there for him. She was there when he nearly died in the apartment fire, after he ran in to knock on the neighbors' doors to warn them, and then back into his own apartment to try and rescue his cat. She held him up while his grandmother passed away this last spring. She was his one main constant during this tumultuous years. Here are a few snippets of the many comments we received from Curtis's friends who knew him and loved him. My childhood was full of joy, and Curtis was a big part of that. His life ended early, but The mark he's left is greater than most leave in 100 years. He's left memories with anyone that knew him. Please know that his memory will live on, and he is etched in so many of our blueprints. He made an impact in this world by persevering through so much and still being such a loving human being. Actually, when I think back, every single time I needed you, you were always there for me without hesitation. I will remember him as a truly great, good person with a giant heart and someone who made people smile. I loved you like a brother. I'm sorry I couldn't help you. I will never forget you. He will be missed by many in many different ways. His smile, his ability to make people laugh, and his genuine love for all the people he knew. I'd like to take this opportunity to say that the outpouring of love and support we've received from our various circles of friends, and especially all of those that he had personally touched during his life, has helped sustain us in these very trying times. So many flowers, cards, so much food, and all the hugs and tears. I want to thank my two sons and their spouses for all they've done in getting this celebration together, as Deb and I would have been lost without their assistance, especially Rachna. And thank you to Larry Thompson and his staff for letting us lean on him as he guided us through this awful process. On behalf of Debbie and myself, we want to take this opportunity to thank you all for taking the time to come out and support us and hear about the good parts of Curtis we will so dearly miss. We may be calling on you in the future. Our hearts are heavy now, but we know better times are ahead. It's time to put our sadness behind